Airbus's Orion capsule has completed mission-critical testing and is now ready for the Artemis 1 mission to the moon. Dr. Brad Tucker and I are diving into this Talking Science Story of the Week.
Across Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts and YouTube, this is Talking Science with Dr. Brad Tucker and Matt Miller.
Alrighty, our last story of the week is the Orion spacecraft that Airbus has built for NASA's Artemis missions. Artemis 1 is coming up and it's going to be the lunar mission. Very exciting on this one. And the more tests are being completed in advance of these missions taking flight.
Yeah, so Orion is the capsule that will be the ride for the astronauts on Artemis. Now, Orion, the first Orion capsule, will be uncrewed, but it's we've talked about delays with Boeing and SpaceX even. We don't say how well Orion has tracked. The Orion capsule has tracked really well in terms of it, and it was way ahead of actually the whole Space Launch System, the rocket. And so it just completed what's called the thermal vacuum testing, where you put space is really harsh. We think of it as being cold, which it is, but it also gets really hot, right? Depending on where you are relative to the Earth and Sun, it can be very cold, minus 150 degrees or so Celsius, and then heating up all the way to 150 degrees Celsius. You have to make sure your electronics and physical material will survive those harsh swings in temperature. So you put in these giant chambers and test it for weeks on end, which they did here. I think they tested it for 47 days to make sure that it will survive those harsh conditions and that trip of going to the moon and back.
Yeah, as you say, it was a 47-day test. That was the thermal vacuum test, and then they put it through 14 days of electromagnetic compatibility and interference testing, which is just an absolutely rigorous schedule. But as you say, it's really needed to find the faults here on Earth before we chuck it up into orbit and send it off to the moon with people on board.
Yeah, and we do this for all. Here at Strumlo, we have what's called our extra large Wombat, which is a thermal vacuum chamber, which does exactly this. But that's only for smaller satellites. When you need to test a whole space shuttle, for instance, or a spacecraft, that's why things like at Johnson Space Center, there's one the entire size of, a 5-story building, because you have to make sure you don't want a faulty wire to go wrong, right, electrically, or a part of the metal to fatigue or anything like that. So you need to find all of the faults to make sure that it's fixed ahead of time, and you also test it for a longer period than it's going to be, right? So testing it for 47 days and 14 days for a trip just back to the moon, which will only be about a week, you make sure that it can withstand that. So you have, anything that you have those contingencies and plans, but also to make sure that you're just not testing it at the border and you just happen to get lucky at that right time. So it's kind of one of those unhidden things that you have to do to prepare for it, but it passed it well, which is it's a great milestone for Orion, and as you said, that return to the moon with Artemis.
It is very cool, and when you dive into Orion, there's more than 20,000 parts and components, and approximately 12 kilometers of cables.
Well, look, it was just what we said with the Mars rover, right? Things go wrong. I mean, how often do you have to restart your phone or your computer, or how often do you check your car into mechanic? Things fatigue, things wear down, and that's in the fairly easy conditions of Earth. And then when you put it in the harsh reality of space and the different environments it goes through, you have to make sure, because one cable, right, 1 centimeter of cable or one of the 200x parts goes wrong, the whole thing stops working, right? Or it might mean that the people don't survive. You really have to make sure everything is as best as you can tested, and you've done as much as you can to say it's the best chance of success, because things will go wrong, right? It's not naive to say it's going to go wrong. It will go wrong. So you make sure that you have your best chance, that you limit the stuff that what goes wrong does go wrong.
And if previous missions in the past and InSight have taught us anything, that if all else fails, they need to just install a little hammer on a bulkhead somewhere. And in case of failure, break glass or something like that. Maybe not break glass, because that'd be a bit of a problem in zero gravity.
Exactly, that's right. Well, maybe they have like steel cap boots, right? So they could just give it a little whack with their foot or something like that. Yeah, and make sure they can have their restart switch with electronics, because it will happen, and that is just part of the reality of space travel. So yeah, it's good that it passed, and it's good that it is tracking well to make it work.
Well, the first service module, which is the one that finished the thermal vacuuming testing, was delivered to NASA in November 2018. The second service module is currently being tested by Airbus. So we're going to have a couple of these for the missions to come, hopefully in 2024, although it's sounding like it might be a little bit delayed, I think, with everything we build in delays.
That's right. But, you want these things to track as quickly as you can, and you want them to work. And, if you remember back to the Apollo capsules, right, there was a separate capsule for each Apollo mission, and this will be the same for the Artemis missions. So, it's the more things are ready, the more things are prepared, the less things you have to wait for things to be fixed. And this was the first capsule that was put through the rigorous testing. So it's good to show that all the designs and the manufacturing and everything like that is working up to this point.
And now it's just a matter of copying and pasting.
Exactly, that's right. It's manufacturing, the first one is always the hardest.
Exactly right.